Some people who support Blake Lively online have tried to tell me that this is just normal behavior. And in fact, men do this all the time.
That's totally untrue. All of that to a studio or producer would be a little disconcerting. You kind of want people who want to do their job. You don't want an editor who wants to suddenly act,
Yeah.
or an actor who wants to edit.
So I'm so thrilled about our guest. I've been trying to get him on my show forever. This is Roy Price. He founded Amazon Studios, was the studio head of Amazon for a while, and then before that was an executive at Disney, worked at McKinsey. I mean, this guy has a crazy impressive resume in the entertainment industry. So we're here, first of all, to talk about a tweet of yours, a recent tweet that blew up and it went viral. And I think you were actually kind of surprised by the intensity of the reaction here. So I want to look at it quickly and we'll talk about it. This Lively Baldoni thing was a huge mistake. This sort of thing worked in 2017 when no one was suing, but now you have to bring actual facts to a jury with cross-examination. I love this. That's a good way to wrap your Ferrari around a palm tree. Insisting that she not be deposed by Brian Friedman, Blake Lively insisting that, is just the cherry on top. Too late to walk it back now. Oh well, Baldoni could easily have $100 million in damages. So is this still your estimation of things? Has Blake Lively made a terrible mistake? Has she wrapped her Ferrari around a palm tree?
Well, I do think the damages for Baldoni could be very considerable, definitely in the 100 million range or above that, which is obviously problematic.
So let's say that Blake Lively finally realized that she needed to capitulate in a big way. And so she gave Team Baldoni and Brian Friedman what they seem to be wanting, which is a full retraction. Let's say that she did that. Do you think that then her reputation and her career could be salvaged? They walk it back, it could be salvaged in some way?
Well, I don't think it would be what it was, because this whole thing has just come off as like a very odd episode. Like you're the actor in the movie. Normally when you signed up to act in it, you didn't sign up to be the co-writer or anything like that. So the whole thing, and then like doing your own edit, like
you're talking about Blake Lively's behavior on this, basically.
Yeah, like that all of that to a studio or producer would be a little disconcerting. You kind of want people who want to do their job. You don't want an editor who wants to suddenly act.
Yeah.
Or an actor who wants to edit.
Right.
If you want it, say so in advance, and like we can make that arrangement. But so the whole thing does come off as a bit odd. And if the accusations in the New York Times thing ultimately come off as like, that looks like a scheme, then that is definitely not good.
Can I ask you quickly, you bring up something here that I wanted to follow up on. You said that could be disconcerting to a studio if you have someone who is going to conduct themselves professionally, like it's alleged that Blake Lively did, taking over these roles, etc. Would you go so far as to say then this is very unusual behavior? Because some people have tried to tell me, who support Blake Lively online, have tried to tell me that this is just normal behavior. And in fact, men do this all the time, but it's only because it's a woman that it's seen as pushy. But if it were a man doing this, trying to take over other roles or exert more creative control in a film, we would just see that as like, oh, he's such an artist. You think that's true?
That's totally untrue. I mean, having the actor in the editing room is extremely unusual, and then just at all, just even to visit, but to be there alone without the director doing your own cut, like what on earth is going on? Like, who's in charge of this movie? And then to be having all these meetings in the middle of production about how, I've rewritten this scene and that scene. I understand people get tempted by that sometimes, but it's kind of frowned upon. Like when we start the movie, we're looking to shoot whatever it is, 5 pages a day. We're not looking to sit around and talk about everybody's new version of the second act. That's problematic. I don't know. It sounds like a roll of the dice. No one wants that kind of thing. In any case, you're never getting in the editing room for sure. So it's extremely unusual, like on pretty unheard of. So So anyway, but is the whole situation reparable? Probably. People have short memories, and it's probably reparable with an appropriate walk back. But I would get to that pretty soon. And for Baldoni, you gotta like whatever gesture is offered to sort of make peace. It has to be a lot. It has to be convincing.
Mm,
It can't just be like, oh, sorry, see you later. Because once you have something like this occur, no one sort of digs into the facts to see you guilty or you're not guilty. Was the claim serious, not serious? No one has time. No one's like a private detective. They don't want to be a private detective. So
right.
you might think, or he might think, oh, it's all going to be fine. Let's just move on. I'll take like $10 million and an apology on Instagram and like, let's move on. You could regret that. Like the damages could be much more serious. It could be as serious as you
Uh,
fear in the worst case scenario, even with an apology. So unless that is some kind of super rock solid apology, then unfortunately you kind of do have to go through the whole litigation. But it looks reasonable that the case will probably get to discovery, which involves depositions, involves handing over all your texts, stuff like that.
right.
That would not be good. Like if there's going to be a settlement, you want to do it like before then. I mean, the other thing that is a variable is how real Blake Lively, thinks it all is.
I think that one of the interesting things about, and I wouldn't presume here to know her psychiatric situation, but with people that like Amber Heard types that I think are cluster B type, she was a diagnosed borderline. Actually, there is a real propensity to rewrite reality in one's mind. I think that's one of the symptoms of it, to where some of these false accusers, they actually believe their own bullshit. And I wonder with Blake Lively, it seems like, as you've said, I agree, she needs to settle, she needs to end this, but I wonder if she is really in a delusional state, or she just thinks that she's entitled to do what she's done for some kind of ideological reasons. The Hollywood Reporter, not always accurate, but they claimed that they had spoken to someone close to Lively and Lively's camp, who claimed that Lively sees herself as the next iteration of Me Too. And so if that's in this,
Oh,
may
you're
not be
going to
her
say
attitude.
the next iteration of Amber Heard.
Well, I
It's like,
think
wow,
that's
that's not, you don't want that.
I think that's the truth there of what she actually is. But no, the next iteration of Me Too, and that she's basically standing up for all women who have to put up with toxic workplaces and so forth. And I just think, man, if that really is, we don't know, but if that really is a reflection of her state of mind, then she's a ways to go from accepting reality.
I mean, that's the thing. If she knows that whatever, she has this evidence and it's all real, and it's all going to come out, then great. And she's kind of striking a blow for justice and all. If that's all real, great. But that's got to be true. Because there might have been a time where you could say, okay, well, this guy's, you're kind of arguing about who really gets to finish this movie and stuff like that. And look, you know what? We're going to meet to him. We got the New York Times on our side. I got my friend over there. They're going to do this and that, and it's going to be done, and it's over. And that it's one step, one and done. And that is the way it used to be. No one like looked into like, is this true?
Right, right.
You don't talk to like the guy in question. That's against the rules. And for a little while, there was this rule set where you absolutely could not lose. You had a guaranteed winning outcome.
If you brought those claims, yes,
Yeah,
you're right.
right. It would be done. And you got like the New York Times on your side. It's like perfectly planned. That is kind of not true anymore. You're probably going to wind up in court. You're going to be cross-examined, deposed, and every text, every email is going to come out. If you delete any text, the court is going to hold that against you in a big way.
Right,
So things have changed. So you got to know that you have a real life case.
right. Yeah,
But
no,
if it is not factual, you got to find a way to pull the ripboard in a hurry.
There was an article in the Hollywood Reporter that got into what it called cultural differences between Wayfarer Studios. And remember, Justin Baldoni works for Wayfarer. This was Wayfarer's project. There were other
Right.
Wayfarer people on it, right? So a culture clash between Wayfarer, which apparently has a number of members of the Baha'i faith, and was founded in part to promote like humanitarian Baha'i principles, right? And so there was like a culture clash between that and sort of the hard nosed, typical way of Hollywood doing things. And so, for instance, there were some examples given in the article, like at meetings, at these Wayfarer meetings for the movie, right? They would open the meetings by asking everybody to go around and talk about something that had brought them joy that day or whatever. And so, the thesis of this article was that maybe one of the factors in this whole thing is that you had these kind of neo hippie spiritual types, like who didn't really have maybe a ton of experience in Hollywood. I mean, I know Justin Baldoni has done other projects and stuff, but like it's still kind of newbies, and they're coming in and they're clashing with this sort of like typical Hollywood things. Do you see any validity in that? Is it kind of unusual to have a production company that will be sort of a different kind of ethos from the stereotypical Hollywood one?
I would just ask you, as an attorney, if you're representing Baldoni, do you want to go to a jury and make the argument you just made that like we have a special faith and it has special different rules? I'd say that's not a good one. You want to back away from that.
I guess what I'm asking is, in your experience working in the entertainment industry, is it common to have a kind of a culture clash between a studio that might have a sort of a different perspective on art or filmmaking or life than sort of the typical Hollywood one? Like, does that happen sometimes? You have things like this, these kinds of culture clashes? No?
I'd say there's kind of one Hollywood culture, and you don't have like some production company with some exotic internal culture. All of this stuff about like I have a special faith and it makes me overly friendly or like whatever the argument is I'd say take that, throw it in the trash can, never mention it again. never mention it in front of a jury. People will just think you're nuts.
Oh man, that's a good point. No, I like the point. What you're saying is that's just not going to wash. And I don't know if
it's not going to wash with an American jury.
I think that's good advice, honestly. It's something that I've said on my own podcast, directing this to Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer, is I think it's great to have a spiritual mission that your company is founded on, but at the same time, when you're out in the real world, you got to meet people where they are. And so I in no way would I'm blaming him for what Blake ended up doing or her misunderstandings or whatever. But you have to understand that some people, they are kind of creeped out by certain ways of being. And that's just, you do have to keep that in mind just as good management, I think. And there's so much stuff. And the thing is, I mean, there's so much stuff that we've already discovered that Blake Lively has lied about. I mean, talk about a delusional state. Her representation and her initial complaint about the dancing video and claiming things that Baldoni said things he didn't say or differently, right? And then we get the video and it's very different. So yeah, I agree with you. You can get them on the factual stuff. Okay. So you have been over, I'd say the past year or so, off and on, tweeting sometimes about Me Too. And you recently posted a tweet where you were asking a number of questions that I think are interesting. And I know people can also go to your Substack and they can see a really great essay that you wrote on this a while back. But several questions you seem to be raising here are, what has the dark side of Me Too been?